I'm Kay Ogden. I'm the Executive Director of the Eastern Sierra Land Trust, and this is Marie up here. Yep, waving a hand, is our AmeriCorps member who runs our education program. For those who don't know anything about Eastern Sierra Land Trust, we're a nonprofit based in Bishop, California, and we work with willing landowners to help protect their land for economic, scenic, recreation, and of course, wildlife connectivity, conservation values. So we also collaborate with our public agencies. In fact, just got a phone call from one asking us if they could utilize our one of the lands that we own to help fight a fire up at Granite Mountain. So if you have any questions about what a land trust does, specifically the work that ESLT does, please feel free to call me or send me an email. We can set up a time to chat. If you've got any questions, it's a weird tool that we use, but it's pretty effective for when it does work. I just want to talk a little bit about technology for today. I think everybody knows you're all muted, and because we've got such a large group, what you can do is raise your hand for a question, or over on the side or at the bottom of your screen, if you click chat, another box pulls up. On my screen, it comes on the right-hand side, and you can send an email to or a chat to everyone in the group or just one person. So that's a nice place if you have a question while our guest speaker is talking, you can pose a question over there. And as we get to the Q&As, that's the first place we'll go to start going through the questions. I want to obviously welcome Pete here today with us. He is our guest speaker, and Marie's going to introduce him a little bit more, but Pete is also on our lands committee, and he's strong advocate for our work, and we really rely on his expertise. Also, living with him, his legal spouse there. Roberta, are you around? Can you just peep in for a sec? Yay, there she is. Lean forward. Now you're disappearing. So Roberta did we can't see you right now, Roberta. Roberta did our drip irrigation workshop this past Saturday, which was just outstanding. And we have a lot of people who want a copy of that, and Marie and I are working on that. We'll get that posted and we'll share it with everybody next week. And I just want to say today is Roberta's birthday. So I want to give a shout out. Happy birthday, Roberta.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Marie now. And I just want to give her a few props because she's our second term AmeriCorps member. And we obviously with COVID had to reimagine this entire program. And she's just done an amazing job to turn, this workshop was an in-person workshop the last 5 years, 6 years. So she's done a great job of turning into these virtual gatherings. And this is, again, the third in our series. And Marie, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay. So many of you probably know this workshop is a part of our Eastside Pollinator Garden project. And for any of you who aren't familiar with our Pollinator Garden project, we work with community members like all of you to help certify your gardens as pollinator friendly. And basically what that entails is an initial garden visit where we'll go over criteria and kind of get a plan for your garden, and then a check-in visit where I would check to make sure the criteria is met, and then a final garden visit where you would get a voucher for the California Native Plant Society fall sale. And then once you get the plants in the ground and it's all checked out, you get a plaque saying your garden is certified as pollinator friendly. And this workshop is a part of that project. And just before we go any further, I just wanted to thank our funders. Metabolic Studio has funded this whole workshop series and the Pollinator Garden project this year. And we also work with fantastic partners like Eastern Sierra Audubon Society, California Native Plant Society, Inyomono Master Gardeners, and University of Nevada, Reno. And so those are our main partners and funders. I just wanted to also introduce Pete. Pete has been a part of the Eastern Sierra Pollinator Garden Project since the very beginning, and he and Roberta have a gorgeous, gorgeous garden. He's also was the past president of the Eastern Sierra Audubon Society, and has helped lead World Migratory Bird Days and several other ESLT events. And with that, I will turn it over to Pete.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for being with us today. Excuse me. I've never done this before, and so we're going to do it with a shared screen PowerPoint. And I've never done that before either. So I always like to talk or start talks like this with a lot of disclaimers about how everything's going to go horribly wrong. And then in case it doesn't go horribly wrong, we can all rejoice together. So let's get started. I'll tell you that the background is not from our garden. And let's go. So can you tell yet that we haven't done it before? Here we go. Wild animals, wild things in your habitat area need your help for a variety of different reasons. One of them is climate change. Another is habitat loss, habitat degradation, invasive species, pesticide use, loss of connectivity. All those things threaten and stress wild creatures, both migratory and residential creatures. And so you are given an opportunity as a gardener to actually give them some assistance. One of the things that you do in your garden is you have the ability to create food factories that turn out regular deliveries of caterpillars, insects, fruits, nuts, seeds, water, and welcoming habitat to sustain migrating and resident birds and other wild things. This was titled as a talk about gardening for birds, and it primarily is, but providing good habitat for birds provides good habitat for other pollinators and also provides good habitat for other animals. Most of the photographs that are in the slideshow are from our yard. Some of them that are not will be obvious, and the other ones I'll let you know. But I think there's clearly a picture from somewhere on the East Coast, and so that should stick out like a sore thumb. The first thing I want to talk to you about, and if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down because this is really, really important. And that is that this is supposed to be fun. This is not, doesn't have to be hard. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's supposed to be something you do that because you want to do it. Because it goes on, there's ongoing activities in your yard. You want to make sure it's fun so that it doesn't turn into a drudge and it doesn't turn into something that you hate to do. What I want to focus on first is what you don't need. You don't need a big space. There are pollinator gardens that have been certified that are really small. There's a couple out here in Chalfont that are just sections of the larger lots. You don't have to start over again. You don't have to go outside tomorrow morning and rip out your whole existing landscape to start all over again. You do not need an unlimited amount of time and or money. Whatever you decide to do, whatever you plan to do, one of the factors that you work out when you're planning your garden is how much time do I want to spend? How much money do I want to spend? You don't need to be an extraordinary gardener, and you don't need to be a wildlife expert. So some of the theories behind the way that you establish one of these gardens is to establish them incrementally. Again, it goes back to the idea that you don't have to go out, tear up your whole landscape, and then start to develop a property-wide landscape that's wildlife friendly. You can do it little bits at a time. This is our back 40 when we first moved into our property. That's all weeds that we took out, or actually the guy with the backhoe took out, and that's before they went to the dump. This is that same area where we're starting to plant. These are native plants that we got from the CNPS sale. If we had close-ups of them, if you've done CNPS sale planting, you know a lot of them are just little sticks. This is the same area. Again, after about 10 years, that's our outdoor railroad that we have, and this is the part of the property that we've designated as the desert garden and the native plant garden. So we started in the front. We had a regular lawn. When we first moved in there, the large rocks that you see were not there at all. It was just a normal old lawn. We decided that a lawn wasn't very in keeping with the character of the community. We're out in Chalfont. And so we took out the lawn and we worked away and worked away. And now we have a front yard that is host to an awful lot of birds and also snakes and lizards and other creatures. That's the backyard. That also was a lawn. So we had just a regular old house with a regular old yard. And again, just by taking out little sections at a time, year after year after year, we were able to develop it into a larger garden area. Those were trees that we planted. The rocks we brought in. This is a medicine wheel garden. That's when we first took out the grass to put that in. And then that too has evolved over time until it looks, I think that's 3 years into the medicine wheel, and that's pretty much what it looks like now. So most all of these plants are pollinator plants, and the majority of them are native plants. There are some advantages to natives, and we'll talk about that. But one of the things you can do too to create a native plant garden is to do that incrementally. When you lose a plant or you move into an area, you just replace the plant that you had or the plant that you lost or the plant that you want to move with a native plant. So how are we going to start? We're going to make a plan for how we're going to do this. In the beginning, the first thing you want to think about when you make your plan is, what do you want from your yard? What kinds of things are you looking for to do in the yard? What kinds of things do you have room to do? What will it sustain? You might want a place to play, a place for your kids to play, a place to entertain, have dinners, parties, whatever, a place to meditate or be contemplative, a place to play games, a place to barbecue and cook, a place to grow vegetables, a place for your animals. We have chickens and we keep bees, a place to paint, make art or music, or anything else. But remember, this is supposed to be fun, and what you want to do is create a yard that you can actually go out in every day and really enjoy it. So this is our back deck, which we use for running the trains and also for having lunch, entertaining. So these are just some photographs of the yard, various places. That's a meditation bench and meditation area. There's some seating. That's our bocce ball area in the back. That's an outside barbecue. That's an outside dining area. We have a labyrinth that we built 2 years ago. We have a developed acre of property, and then we have an adjacent undeveloped acre. So those are just some ideas about what you can do at your location. What you want to try to think about providing is food, shelter, nesting structure, material to make nests, water, safety from predators, for perching, and my favorite bird activity, which is also my favorite person activity, which is called loafing. And that's an actual birding term. It's makes me happy every time we're out counting birds and say, what are they doing? And you get to make a notation that they're just loafing. And what that means is they're just resting. It's a really important thing for migratory birds. Migratory birds fly long distances over long periods of time. And when they come down and they have a chance to rest and loaf, it's really important that they have a safe place to do that. Lastly, what you want to look for is to create some diversity in your planting. Diversity in your planting is really important, and we'll show you some of the plants as we go through this that are in our yard. But you don't want to plant a monoculture. For one thing, because that makes your yard susceptible to disease, which can take out your entire yard. Out here in Chalfont, there are lots of people who planted cypress trees as windbreaks. As those of you who have cypress trees know, in the last few years with the drought, the long drought, those trees got invaded by insects, and now they're all dying. So if you had a windbreak that was all cypress trees, now you don't have a windbreak at all. The same thing, the other reason to plant diverse plants is that you get a diverse crop of wild creatures. If you plant just one kind of plant that creates the single food source, you're automatically limiting what kind of things are going to come into your yard. If you plant a wider diversity of things that provide seeds or nuts or berries or other kinds of fruit, you're going to attract a wider variety of things. Yeah. So these are just some of the plants that we have. We've got grapes. You want to try to create a garden that has plants that will bloom or make food, seeds, or whatever throughout the year. So I know our bees start to get active in February, and so we want to do blossoming plants. These berries and these birds are not ours. But berries are really important to birds, especially in the fall. We get a whole host of robins every year in the fall that feed off our pyracantha. Yeah, sticky plants, though that was the deodar we had in the front, which was just massively filled with ants. As a consequence, it was massively filled with birds. Seed heads are good after the plants have seeded, and a lot of those seed heads provide food even into the winter. Same thing with fruit trees. This is from Descanso Gardens. Okay, keep going.
All right.
Keep going. We leave our dandelions out. Number one, it means we don't have to go to the work of weeding them. And number two, the goldfinches and other pollinators really like them, and they come up early, so they're available early in the season. That's a hawk making a meal of a mockingbird that it took off our back fence. We have a Cooper's hawk that lives mostly in the yard. He is one of my favorite birds, although we lost a chicken to that bird. So that was kind of a mixed deal. I really like that Cooper's hawk a lot, but it was one of my favorite chickens too. So it's a little drama in Chalfont. One of the things that you need to provide for wildlife in your yard is water. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. We have a number of bird baths in our yard. We've made a couple out of satellite dishes that were left over from people who had the house before us. They serve birds, but they also are used by the rabbits, especially in our front yard that's not fenced. And they also are used by the lizards. There's the hawk again at our neighbor's bird bath. Here's some nesting areas out in the back. I think this year we probably have a dozen nests throughout the property. We've got nesting finches, goldfinches. I think we might have nesting orioles. We've had kingbirds. We've got the ubiquitous Eurasian collared dove nests, lots of sparrows nests, things like that. This is an antique lantern that a bird built a nest in and fledged a little family out of. This is a box that we actually have 2 or 3 of these. It's a 3-sided box, and so birds can come in there during the winter and stay warm. Okay. Also, these are quail bathing in the dust, and a number of different kinds of birds like to take dust baths as well as regular baths in the bird baths. This is an area we created. It's supposed to be a pollinator hotel. I'm not sure, though, if we've ever actually had any bees move into that. But we have had, as you can see over on the left-hand side, we have had birds come and remove some of the material from inside there to make nests. So yeah, those are ravens loafing, hanging out. We have a lot of ravens out here, and we usually get juveniles, which remind me a lot of adolescent young men, hang around on our fence and look at each other and just act goofy. We had a family of roadrunners. I think we had 5 altogether in our yard in 2018, but we haven't had them since. There's the hawk again. These are phoebes. The mother moved when they fledged. The mother would bring them into our patio area. They practiced flying inside the patio. So, in order to make a plan, what you need to do is go outside and just hang out. Get to know what your space is like. What's in your space. You already probably have some wildlife and birds that occupy your space. So take a look at it, see what comes into your yard. If you like what you have, look at that for ideas to maintain that inside your design. Watch the birds, see what it is that they do. Where do they go? What plants do they frequent? Where do they hang out? Where do they go when they're scared? Where do they rest? Do they already feed on anything right now? And how does that stuff that you have already in your yard fit into your larger vision? So that can be a kind of a strong anchor point for starting out to make an incremental plan to design your garden. The second thing is you can sit down and you can actually say, what is it that I'd like to attract in our yard? Because we're out here in a really rural area, we just have a lot of birds all around to begin with. But we make it a real point to try to attract orioles and tanagers and grosbeaks because they're just gorgeous birds. And so we've put up feeders, and we've created some perching areas and some other food sources that are specific to the orioles. I don't think so.
Okay.
When you think about what it is that you want to attract, get to know a little something about that animal. If you've seen them out in the wild and you know where they are, go out and take a look at them and observe them and see what they do. What kind of plants are they on? Can you see them feeding on plants? What kind of plant communities or structures do they frequent? There's also a bazillion internet sources. Audubon, CNPS, Columbia University, the bird program, the ornithology school at Columbia. And they all have lists that actually have specific plants that support specific species. So if you say, you know, what I'd really like to have a lot of in my yard is whatever, an X and Y, you can look that up and find out what it is that you need to plant. So another good way to plan is to borrow from your neighbor's garden. These are trees that are, part of them are in the neighbor's yard. The big deodar is in our neighbor's yard. But that's a great tree for raptors and owls to hang out in. And so we sort of incorporated that tree in our overall planning for the yard because it gave us an opportunity to have a raptor attraction. So if you have the same kind of thing that your neighbors have, figure out a way that you can incorporate that view or whatever, that feature, into your own yard plan. So get to know then, after you've said, okay, here are the areas that I want to do this. I want to have an area to entertain. I want to have an area to sit quietly. I want to have an area where I'd like to feed birds, where I have a good view of them. I'll be able to see them when they feed. I want to have an area that's maybe habitat for nesting, give some thoughts then, of course, to what you're going to plant. We can just go through this while the slides are going. Plant in masses. A lot of clumps of things attract more birds. They attract more insects. They attract more pollinators, and they also are visually, I think, really, really attractive. I'm not very excited about specimen gardens. This is Snow Creek in Mammoth. But again, you have these big clumps and clusters of flowers or whatever. It gives you a nice structure, gives you a nice view. You want to think again about plants that provide food sources throughout the year, starting in early spring all the way into early winter. You want to look at plantings that sustain multiple stages of insect life. So if you want to attract butterflies, for example, you're going to need plants that not only attract butterflies and provide food for butterflies, but you also need a separate category of plants that provide for food for and places for the caterpillars and for them to pupate, because they're not the same plants. So you need to know what kind of plants you need throughout stages of life. Okay.
Okay, this is the,
I don't know what that is.
that's the sheltering part.
Give some thought to how those plants look throughout the year so that you have a succession of blooms. That way we have something where something's in bloom all year long. Think about what kind of wildlife they're going to attract and support. Then when you start to look at specific plants for specific places, give some thought to how big they're going to get. And when they do get bigger, what are they going to hide and encroach upon? We have a lot of rock structure in our yard because we just really like rocks. And I can't tell you the number of rock features that we created and then planted in and around, and then the rocks just disappeared. The same thing happens when you plant plants. Sometimes plants will just take over for others. So you have to be patient, not a strong suit of mine, but you have to understand that when you plant today, 3 years from now, when that plant gets to be as big as it says on the tag, it's going to encroach on some of your other features. Understand too that some plants just work for you and some plants don't. This is the area around our beehive. Again, we've tried to plant things near the hive that come into bloom early in the spring. So it gives the bees a food source right next to them. We've also got stuff in that area that blooms year long, again, in support of the bees. When you do your plantings, you want to create multiple layers of plants. So you want to have plants that are on the ground level, grasses, short flowers, short shrubs, ground covers. We have a lot of our yard that is devoted to what we call the meadow. It used to be a lawn, and now we replanted that with yarrow. So it's kind of a meadow of yarrow plants and a little bit of clover, and then a bunch of interspersed planting beds. But that's good for birds that feed on the ground. A lot of the plants that are low growing are seed sources. And so those are really good. Our meadow is really good for our quail and all of the finches. You want a mid-level of tall flowers and shrubs. You want that for birds that need to get up off the ground. They may want to get up off the ground to perch. Some of them will get up off the ground to fly catch. And those, again, those mid-level shrubs and plants can provide food sources. Lastly, you want trees in your yard. Trees are good sources for nesting. They're great sources for perching. They're great sources for hiding from predators. And they're also good sources for birds to perch and fly catch. We've also created a lot of artificial perches. We get a lot of cut down tree branches, big long branches, 15-foot branches, and we've just put those up from place to place so that the birds have a place to perch. I talked about mass plantings. Here's, you can see a mix of the meadow area. This is when it was mostly grass, now it's mostly yarrow. But you've got large plants in the back and a variety of heights. It's a good idea, I think, to plant with native plants for two reasons. Number one, the native plants in your area are going to be hardier, and so they're going to be more likely to be adapted to the climate and adapted to what the climate can provide for them in the extremes. And secondly, because they're native plants, more likely to be good food sources for native wildlife. So my advice again is start with native plants slowly. You don't have to go out and fill your whole yard with native plants. We have a mixture. We have a large number of plants that are not strictly native to this area. They're native to California. And so by doing that kind of mixture of things, you can satisfy your aesthetic sense while providing good, reliable sources of food for your birds and other wildlife. Let's see. So we'll talk a little bit about feeders. Feeders are, I guess, somewhat controversial. There are some people who don't believe in putting out bird feeders or feeding for birds for a variety of reasons. One, I think people think that, and there's a certain amount of truth to this, it encourages dependence on the part of the birds on these feeder sources. Feeders can support birds that you don't necessarily want to attract or support, like cowbirds or starlings or some sparrow species. Feeders also attract mice, and you can get around all those things in a couple of ways. One is you take care of your feeder. If you don't want to attract mice to the feeders areas, don't overfeed. Make sure you keep them clean. Make sure you keep them maintained. The other thing you can do is you can feed or provide feeders for specific birds. We feed for goldfinches and other finches. We feed for hummingbirds, and we feed for orioles and tanagers, and that's it. So we have hummingbird feeders, as you can see here. We feed with Niger seed feeders for the finches and the goldfinches. Others will use the hummingbird feeders. Orioles will feed out of them, and house finches really like to feed off of them as well. And then this is a feeder that we made that holds orange halves, and they also really like grape jelly. So if you put out a little bowl of grape jelly, you'll find yourself being the local hotspot for Orioles. This is Megan. That was our neighbor's dog, and she used to come garden with us. She'd garden with us every Sunday while I think her family was probably at church. And she was really a great friend. These birds are not likely to be attracted to your yard unless you specifically bring them there for that purpose. These are actually birds that are down near Owens Lake. And I think they're just really a lot of fun. So you can have that kind of birds. The last thing I want to talk to you about really quickly is two things. One about your feeders and your bird bass or water sources. Keep these things clean. Keep your bird feeders clean. Don't overfeed. Don't get trash and seed onto your lawn. That'll keep the mice away. Keep your bird bass clean. We keep ours with water by hooking up our drip system to the bird bass. I think we have something like 6 or 8 bird bass here and there. And all of those stay filled because we keep them filled with the drip system. The thing you want to be really careful about with both bird bass and bird feeders is that you don't set the birds up to be predated. So you want them out in the open. You want them not to be near any kind of structure that a predatory bird or neighborhood cat could use to launch themselves at the birds that are using your feeder or your bird bath. You do want to have some perching opportunities for the birds, but you can incorporate that into the feeder or into the bird bath. Bird bath should be shallow. If you've got a kind of a deep container for your bird bath, put a rock in it or something like that, so the birds can stand on that rock and they're not exposed to really deep water. Also, if you keep bees or you want to attract pollinators, bees also like water sources. So by our hives now, we have a couple of bird baths that are dedicated to the bees. Also, if you can create little areas that are kept muddy most of the time, you'll find that your butterflies really like that. So I want to close out by sort of going full circle. We talked about how this is supposed to be fun to do, and it is. It's also supposed to be, you want to ask yourself, what's in this for me? What am I going to get out of this? And that is, I think, and I hope that you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of being in your yard. During this COVID period, our yard has been a godsend for us. We've spent an awful lot of time just sitting out there in the last 2 months, sort of saying, gee, I'm glad we did this. I don't know how many times in the last 15 years, which is what our garden represents, is 15 years of work, that I've cursed the darkness or whatever else there was out there to curse. But I have to tell you, in the last 2 months, the ability to sit on the patio, the ability to go sit quietly in some of the quiet spaces that we've created, the ability to look out over the White Mountains, the ability to watch birds feed, to watch them court, to watch them now nesting, has really been calming and has really been a great thing. We like to entertain in our yard. We like to share it with other people. But, you know, remember, this is fun. Remember to give yourself an opportunity to enjoy it. Take the time to enjoy it. Having a garden isn't all about digging with a shovel. It should be all about really enjoying the fruits of your labors. So with that, if there are any questions or anything, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Or Roberta, who really, I know a lot about the shoveling part, and Roberta knows a lot about why the shoveling was done to create what spaces for what plants. So we'd be happy to share any information that you might find valuable.
Great, thank you, Pete. There is one question that was posed earlier from Valerie, and she said at the end, could Pete share the photo again of the oranges and tanager, I think? Looks like screws holding fruit. You kind of circled towards the end and talked a little bit, but could you circle back?
Yeah, that's what that is. That was our first iteration of an Oriole feeder. And what we did was we just took a board and so that's it there. We just took a board and we put screws through the bottom of it that came up through the top, and then just jammed the oranges onto that. What we have done now is we got a really big, well, not really big, but a metal platform seed feeder, which is, you know, just a flat surface that you put seeds on. And instead of using that for seeds, we just put the orange halves in that, surround the little dish of grape jelly. But the screws holding the orange halves works really perfectly.
Pete, can you see the questions that are over there on the chat, or would you like me to read them out?
Why don't you read them?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm having trouble getting the view I got when I did mine last week.
Oh, okay, no worries. It's
Not getting the people in they're either the whole screen or none. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong.
okay. We can problem solve in a little bit if you'd like. The next question here was from Harriet. How do you discourage predators such as raccoons, opossums, other critters that eat birds?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know what you do to discourage raccoons. Having a dog would probably be helpful. We do not have that. What we have is I'll try to make this story short. but I was at somebody else's ranch, and they were having trouble with raccoons and also with skunks, and they had gotten these little flashing red lights and installed them, and they're called night guards, and I'm not sure who makes them, but I was talking with them, and they said that they actually work. So we have surrounded our chicken coop with I think 5 or 6 of these lights. They're solar powered, and so they just flash on and off at night. And we've done. They don't keep the raccoons out of the yard, but they do keep them out of the chicken area. Beyond that, I don't know what you do with raccoons. Having had raccoons in the house, not in this house, but when we lived in Stockton and also once in Yosemite, I don't know what you do to discourage them. They're just single-minded little creatures. So if somebody else knows the answer to raccoons, I'd sure like to know it, because we find evidence of raccoons in our yard all the time. Again, we have a lot of coyotes out here. So part of our yard is fenced and part of it is not. And again, I don't think we've lost birds to coyotes. People in our neighborhood lose chickens, but I think we've lost more birds to other birds out here than we've lost to anything else. We've lost several birds to the hawk. We had the picture of the mockingbird. There were 2 mockingbirds on our back fence, and they were really chatty and noisy, and they were just calling to each other and singing to each other all afternoon. And all of a sudden, the hawk took one of them, and the other mockingbird stayed in the yard, but it didn't sing for like a week. And the chickens were out, and they were appalled by this whole thing, and so they stuck to home. So I think that the most predation we get is from predatory birds.
So in Chalfont, nobody lets their cats outside loose because they get eaten also. So that helps us out here. And the night guard, if you just Google night guard, you'll find the company directly, and you can order from them. They're often in poultry supply catalogs as well, and I think they're available on Amazon.
And I've talked to other people who use those, and I have never talked to anybody who didn't think that it was a reasonable idea. So they sure seem to work for us.
Oh, and Marie, I sent you a picture of the other feeder Pete was talking about. I don't know if you could figure out a way to pop it up there.
Sure, give me just a second.
Well, why don't we move on to the next
sure,
question while you're doing that?
Definitely.
Cheryl asks, I'm in Ridgecrest, which is Kern County. Do we have a pollinator garden project here?
I don't know, but there's an Audubon chapter in Ridgecrest, and so I suspect that they would know. Who else?
The birding lady, what's her name? That worked at the lab.
Oh, the Steeles.
Yeah, Bob and Susan.
And Susan Steele in Ridgecrest. You might have seen their photography. They take a lot of really gorgeous pictures of birds. You might be able to contact them and let them ask them. Bob Steele has a website for his photography, and you might be able to contact him through that website. But I would also guess that you might be able to contact an Audubon Society. I know there's a broader Kern County Audubon, but there might be one for there. Also, if you have a CNPS chapter there, actually, that would also be a good place to go and see whether or not they have a pollinator program. State Audubon and state CNPS have broader programs, at least as an information source. I don't know if they have the kind of program here that certifies gardens and provides, technical assistance, but they might.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll be certified, but just to have more information about it would be helpful so I know more what to plant and things. So
The CNPS website, if you go to California Native Plant Society, they have plant lists by zip code. And so those plant lists, you can zero down into your zip code and see what kind of native plants grow well for you. And my recollection of that site is, and also the California Audubon, I think, site will give you bird-specific plants. So if you say, I really want to have goldfinches galore, they can help you figure out what to plant for that.
And I would say the plants that we can grow here, you can definitely grow down in Ridgecrest, and you probably can grow a few more. You can grow more cactus down there because it's a little bit warmer in the winter. So you could use the resources in Yamato County to help as well.
I also wanted to add that our next workshop, which will be next Thursday from 2 to 3, is going to focus on a little bit more of like the plant aspect of it and the native plant, like which native plants. So I would definitely recommend tuning into that. I'll be sending out the meeting information.
Marie, were you able to get the picture up from?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Let's see if I can.
Just let me know if you want me to go to the next question or wait.
No, give me just.
Okay.
So,
So as you can see, the oranges get well used.
and is this the metal feeder you were talking about, Pete?
Right, and that we got, I think, at a crafts fair or something like that. So it's just the idea is you're supposed to fill that metal plate, for lack of a better word, with just loose seed. That's a really poor way to use a feeder, as an aside, because it's really messy and it creates a lot of competition among birds. And it also, it's really non-discriminatory about what kind of birds you get. So we really liked it because we thought it was an attractive piece. And so we put it to use and put it to work for our orioles. And it wasn't this year, but we have had in the past, at the same time, we had an oriole, a tanager, and a grosbeak on that at one time. It was really exciting.
Harriet, oops, went over here, says, do you spend any time identifying birds? Do you have a good book or app you can recommend?
We spend a lot of time identifying birds. We have a yard list. I think we're at 70 now of birds that we've had either above or in our yard. We just added an egret. I don't know why it was flying over our house, but it got itself on the list. We have, I think the easiest, quickest field guide is probably one of the Jack Laws, either the Sierra Nevada Jack Laws or the Jack Laws Pocket Guide to Birds, but it's not hugely complete. The reference we probably use more than anything else is Sibley.
And I'll just say, I don't know when, but often Pete and Roberta help guide our International Bird Migration Day tours that we do here on the east side if you're in the area. But obviously that didn't happen this year. I don't know, when that might happen again. Pete, your next question is, if I have a bird bath fed twice daily by dropper, but how often do you empty the bath to clean it, or is that even necessary? We got thanks, Valerie.
I think you should look at it once a week because you've got an influx of clean water on a regular basis. You're probably not going to have the kind of trouble that might come from having water stagnate. And out here, things evaporate so quickly that the idea of cleaning bird baths really goes to the idea of not having algae buildup or other things like that. So I take a look at it once a week at least, but you should be probably okay because you've got that turnover of clean water coming on a regular basis. And just really quickly, let's see, if I hold this up, can you see it?
Put it right in front of you.
Yeah.
Make
Right
you
in
the
front of me.
background.
So that's
There you
the
go, right there.
and this is the Jack Law's book. And the Jack Law's book is really a wonderful book because it's color coded. And so all you have to do is be able to recognize the color of the bird, and you can find your way into it. The problem is that he doesn't go very far east of the Sierra. So some of the birds that we get that are Great Basin birds might not be in there, but it's a really fun book, and anything you can do to support Jack Laws is probably a good idea.
In the Audubon app.
And also we have on our, we use the Audubon app, which you can get by just going to Audubon Society.
And when we send out the thank you for today, we'll put those book titles in the thank you, so you've got that as well. Another one from Harriet. Notice any particular flower that is particularly appealing to hummingbirds?
Penstemons.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
Fuchsias.
fuchsias are also,
Oh, here, I got my book right here.
but penstemons are, they just go crazy for those. They also, what's the vine that we have?
Oh, it's not in there.
It's not native, but whoever had that, the person who had the house before us planted the world's most invasive vine that covers like half of our back fence, but it flowers like crazy, these really pretty orange and yellow flowers. And they like that, but they like penstemons, I think, above all.
And they like red.
Anything with red is going to attract hummingbirds. And also, so the other thing, if you put out feeders and you want the birds to notice the feeders, we tie red ribbon to the feeders, and we also tie red ribbon near the bird bass because the birds will key on that and gets their attention, and they come over and visit.
There's a couple comments, and I'm not going to say this right, so I apologize, Cheryl. Maybe you should. She has Hesperalo. Hesperalo.
Yeah, is something that the hummingbirds really like here.
Cool.
They're crazy for it. So.
Okay. And then Valerie also says that she's also ordered a solar fountain to place in the bird bath. She can't wait till she gets it.
That'll be cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? There's nothing in chat, but you can raise your hand and we could. Yeah, Donna, well, let's see. Let me unmute you and you can just, oops.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yes, Marie, Marie and I did it simultaneously. So we unmuted you and muted you again, just that fast. So you're good to go now.
Okay, thanks. We just started like there was garden here, but there's a leach field on the side that was just empty. So we put in a bird area for the birds with feeders and water, and we just planted some things which aren't up yet. But we had the orioles come through, and then the orioles left, and then the grosbeaks, I think is how you say it, came, and now they're gone. So do they come in waves like that, or?
They do. By and large, they're on the way to the mountains. The grosbeaks and the tanagers go up to higher altitude, and so they come through. We actually have, out here in Chalfont, there are some nesting orioles, so they don't migrate beyond here to nest, but by and large, most of them are on the way up the hill.
But the orioles, they're probably on their nests right now, and after they hatch their babies, they're going to come back. So just keep putting oranges out, because the finches will feed off the oranges. But in a few weeks or a month, you're going to see orioles again, and they'll come and bring their fledglings. And so you'll get a whole family.
Oh, nice.
So oranges all summer.
Okay, good to know. Valerie, did I see you want to say something? Well, she has a question here, and then I'll go back up to Harriet. Could Pete explain medicine wheel?
Oh, well, a medicine wheel garden is it's a garden design. It's a Native American design. And so it's a big circle that's divided into four quadrants, quarter circles. And as a medicine garden, each quadrant was planted with medicinal plants. And so that's the traditional origin and use of the garden. It's a garden design kind of thing. And so we laid ours out with the coordinates of the compass, but instead of planting medicinal plants, we divided it into four color quadrants. So we have a purple, yellow, white, and red quarter wheel.
Hi, Valerie.
Harriet, there's Valerie. Did we get your question, Valerie?
Yeah, so traditionally each quadrant would be for a particular ailment.
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
Okay, yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
There's if you Google medicine wheel gardening, there's a book that it sort of explains the more traditional origins and orientations. We knew that we wanted to take out a huge amount of lawn in the back, and we weren't sure what to do with it. And then we saw one of these gardens and thought, well, that's a good design, that'll work for us. So that's how it ended up with us.
Okay, thank you.
Harriet says, I grew sunflowers and the birds loved it, but I was a bit annoyed that I didn't get any. Any way to protect produce?
You're probably asking the wrong people. Roberta says yes. I don't ever bother with that. So, I mean, we grow some things like grapes, specifically for the birds. And so we don't really bother taking things out, but I know you can use nets.
You can use mesh nets, like the potatoes come in and things like that. And you put them over what you're trying to protect and zip tie them around the stem. I do that to collect seeds. If you're actually really collecting seeds, there are finer mesh nets available at the paint store for straining paint. And then you put that over the flower, and it still gets sunlight, but it keeps most of the birds away. And then at the end of the season, you chop off the stem, turn it upside down, and then you have all your seeds in the bag. Some people could use, I think, pantyhose. Pantyhose is good for fruit to keep the bugs off of it. I don't know how well it works with birds, but who has pantyhose in the Eastern Sierra? Nobody. I think it would be too tight for plants, for flowers. But we just have an abundance, and hopefully there's some left over for, there's enough for everybody.
Well, thanks, guys. We're at our hour. Pete, amazing. Roberta, amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for coming. Marie, do you want to talk just quickly about the next one? I mean, I know you did,
Sure.
but just I think you've got a slide or something.
I do, yep.
Awesome.
So our next workshop is going to, as I mentioned, is going to be next Thursday from 2 to 3, and it's going to be about plants and pollinators, and it's going to feature guest speaker Elijah Hall, who is working with both a university in Southern California and California Native Plant Society, and he's going to be sharing more about some of the specific plants you can plant in your garden, and a little bit about what he has learned through his experiences about plant and pollinator interactions. And then also next week, we're kicking off our Happy Place book club, and we'll be reading and discussing the first half of Breeding Sweetgrass. And so if anyone is interested in that, please feel free to shoot me an email.
And I'll just say, you've got some more webinars that are just
Yes.
that we'll be announcing once
Yep.
we confirm a date. You've got some speakers who are shown interest, and now we'll just be setting dates.
Yes, we will most likely be having one about soil science and composting, and then hopefully one about butterflies. So stay tuned for those, and I'll keep everyone updated.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Pete. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to send us any questions. Bye.